And so as we'll go through this presentation, we're going to talk today about the 7 must-have skills for remote workers. So let's dive in. The topics for the 7 must-have skills for remote workers. We'll talk today a little bit first about the demand for remote work, the top 7 skills, of course, that's the feature of the webinar. And then we're going to kind of go through some exercises on how you can determine the skills that you already have of these 7. Will also help you decide what skills to develop if you'd like to work on some of them. And then we're going to kind of go through some actionable steps to adding these skills to your resume. But first, before we dive into those skills, I just want to share some statistics with you. I don't know that you will be surprised by this if you are a job seeker who is looking for remote work, but through our surveys that FlexJobs has done consistently over the last few years, a very high majority of workers who respond to our surveys want remote work in some form or another. In fact, 96% in our last survey. So what does that mean? It kind of breaks down into most people, 65% want to work fully remote, always from home or wherever they are. 31% of people are fine and prefer a hybrid work schedule, which essentially means you do have some remote work time, but also you have some time in the office as well. Now, many of you know this if you have experience working remotely, but there are a lot of different benefits that come with working remotely. And I think what we've seen since the pandemic is that a lot of people started working remotely kind of unexpectedly and then realized that remote work does offer some great flexibility oftentimes with some increased independence, as well as even increased productivity, because you are even just the time saving as a result of not commuting can help ensure that you are more productive during the day because you don't have that time commitment to commute and certainly don't have the stress of a commute, which sort of, when I used to commute kind of a, I had to take a few minutes when I got to work to get situated to be in the right frame of mind to start work. So it really does save some time. Not only does it save time when you're not commuting, a lot of remote workers report saving a lot of money, wear and tear in the car, of course, gas, but even eating out or even sort of apparel choices in terms of, you might be able to be a little bit more casual when you work remotely versus in the office. And so there are a lot of benefits to remote work, which is why I'm sure many of you are here in terms of doing what you can to set yourself up for success in a remote job search. So let's go through the 7 skills that employers who hire remote candidates desire. Because even though the demand for remote work has grown, there are some of us who maybe aren't prepared for the challenges that remote work can bring, or maybe it's not that we're not prepared. Maybe it's more so that what is it that I need to do to be the best candidate I can for remote work? So in addition to having the specific skills and experience to do the job that you are applying for, you do need to have some specific skills to be successful in a remote environment because it is different than being face to face with people every day. If you do have these skills, you do want to highlight them for remote employers. And as I mentioned, we will chat about those shortly. So let's go ahead and dive into skill number 1. The ability to work independently. Employers who hire remote employees, typically expect their workers to know their job and meet expectations without much handholding. It kind of has to be done that way, right? Because virtual workspaces, although they allow for communicating with others, responses from your manager or coworkers may not be as quick as popping into an office or discussing an issue with the coworker, in the next cubicle, because some of you might be working at the same time in a synchronous way, and some of you might not be, which is asynchronous. And so you really need to be able to continue to press on with your day, to start your day before you can even talk to anybody or whatever time it is, and really lean into being resourceful, problem solving and being able to do some troubleshooting when you might be the only one online at that particular time. And so the ability to work independently and then these sub skills are really helpful if you have them because it allows you to sort of be an independent worker, even if your manager's out or something like that. All right. Along the same lines, I think these two are really related in terms of self-motivation, but because your boss or manager is not there to physically check on you in your home office, again, you need to be able to just get started with work. You need to create an environment and a schedule for yourself that works, a routine, if you will, that can help you keep focused on and on task with your work. And it's also important that you limit distractions because distractions can kind of pull from that motivation. Think about if you have kiddos at home, you might I recommend always hiring supervised care for them. Or, make sure that they are not around or they are occupied when you are doing your work. Having a designated home office with a door can also provide kind of a way to minimize distractions, like the laundry room or TV if somebody else is watching it. Not everybody, my office at my house does not have a door. Actually, it's kind of an open room, but it is in the front of the house. So I do have to manage things a little bit differently by closing other doors where people are, or by if somebody happens to be home when I'm working, sending a text that I'm recording a segment or doing something so that it remains, transparent to my employer or people who I'm working with. That's really, really important. Okay, this is not a surprise at all, I'm sure, but written communication is so key because video and phone conferencing are essential for connecting with colleagues in a remote environment. So you definitely will be using video, probably phone conferencing, or even just online, chatting like through Zoom or something. But email and other messaging tools are also very popular and very heavily used in remote work environments, especially if you have people across time zones or across the globe. I've talked about asynchronous work a little bit. So, miscommunication and a lack of message clarity could be something that's a big time waster and cause frustration across your team or among all workers. And so, making sure that you have clear writing, that you are succinct, whether it's through email, online messaging, or a note in like a project management program, is critical. And I'll just give this tip here. I find that one of the things in one of my first remote jobs that I learned, which seems obvious as I share this with other people, but it's something that not everybody does. When you are trying to contact somebody via message or via email, you kind of want to get to the heart of the matter right away and just say, is it possible for you to get me this, or whatever your question is? At this organization that I worked at, they had this rule that every email should start with a greeting, like, hi, Annie, hi, Tony, hello, good morning, whatever that might be. And if you really think about it, or you go through some of your emails, those emails that do start with a really nice greeting, a simple greeting, is really, it makes a difference. And once I started doing that, I just noticed the whole tone kind of shifts. You kind of have to think about if you were in office and somebody came to your cubicle or somebody came to your office, they wouldn't just come in and say, can you get me that report by 3 o'clock today? No, they would probably say something like, hey, Tony, how are you? Can I ask you a question? And you should do the same thing in your written communication as well. All right, comfort with digital communication tools. We were just talking about email, of course, and other messaging tools. But for any remote company that you work for, you have to collaborate effectively in that type of environment, which requires use of digital communication tools. And there are many different online tools and digital resources that companies use. We've got some on the slide here. And so you kind of want to be able to be comfortable with project management programs, video meeting software, and company specific digital platforms, which you might learn about once you get hired. Sometimes that's not exactly in the job description. Um, each company might have its own, not might, each company does have its own like system, if you will, and methods for getting work done and keeping their workers engaged. So you want to make sure that you embrace that, that you are open to learning new things. And on the screen, you can see that there's different messaging tools like Slack and Google Chat. This is not a comprehensive list of video conferencing of any of these tools, really, but you can see some that are on here that might be helpful to know. Now, when you are going through job applications, this is a really good way to determine what digital communications tools would be good for you to focus on are the ones that are mentioned most frequently in the job descriptions that you are reading for the jobs that you want to apply to. Like you might see that Microsoft Teams is mentioned in 5 out of 7 of the descriptions that you look at, and Google Meet is never mentioned. And so what would you prioritize? You would prioritize the Microsoft Teams over, Google Meet in that instance. Next skill we have is, being a team player. We've talked about collaboration, but also having that cross-cultural literacy, because working remotely usually means you're working at home alone, right? In your home place, you don't have other people from your office at home with you, but it does not mean you are alone, because you are part of a larger team and an organization. So communicating and collaborating are essential skills. So to fulfill your duties well and on time, you are going to be accountable to other team members, and you'll need to keep them informed. Now, a big advantage of remote work for employers is the ability to hire the best workers regardless of where they live. And again, that might mean you have coworkers all around the world, which is fantastic and offers so many opportunities to meet so many different people. It does, and it can make for an interesting and dynamic work culture. Because it also can prevent some challenges with language barriers, communication styles that are different cultures, even just different holidays and traditions that vary all around the world. So as a remote worker, you need to be aware of and sensitive to these differences when you're working with people who are, in a different country than you. Okay. You must have reliable and secure equipment. While that's not a specific skill, this is something that you definitely want to have a handle on when you start working remotely. Some employers actually might ship company-owned equipment to a new employee, or they may provide a stipend or reimbursement for your equipment. Stipends really allow employees like a certain amount of money per quarter or per year to spend on whatever technology and equipment they might need to work remotely, like computers, wireless keyboards, an ergonomic chair, chargers, headsets, different things like that. Employees would typically purchase the items themselves, and then with a stipend, you can submit the receipt for reimbursement. Now, not all employers provide that equipment. So if they don't, you might be responsible for obtaining the tools that you need. So if you're a new remote worker, sometimes your existing computer is sufficient, sometimes it's not. Employers would likely give you some sort of indication of what your computer speed and strength might need to be in the job description. This slide has the resource speedtest.net if you need to know what your internet speed is. Other employers might have technical requirements that might mean buying new equipment, like they might want you to work on a Mac instead of a PC or vice versa. Because much of your work is going to be done and communication also through online methods, it's critical that you have quality security in place, including a secure internet access and antivirus applications. Now, one of the things about remote work that's great is you can go to a coffee shop or, library or somewhere to work. But if you are doing that, you want to have a password protected hotspot instead of using free unsecured Wi-Fi. All right. Last skill, emotional intelligence. Accurately identifying your emotions and the emotions of others is important when you are working with other people in person and remotely, but particularly remotely, again, because sometimes your communication isn't going to be done at the same time. And then beyond that, you want to make sure you manage your emotions, which includes controlling them. It includes your ability to influence others' emotions, like trying to calm them down or cheer them up. Um, you know, Emotional intelligence enables you to be self-aware, empathetic, and adaptable in the face of any remote challenges that you come across. So this is something to keep in mind. We also have a webinar on emotional intelligence too, so that might be helpful to dive a little bit more into it. Um, and in a remote work environment where you don't always have access to the nonverbal cues, that might help you kind of read the room, if you will, if you've ever heard that phrase before, to respond appropriately. Having a high emotional intelligence helps you solve problems, resolve conflicts, and really be able to listen to your colleagues. All right, so let's talk about how to figure out what skills you already have. Here are a few exercises. You first want to ask yourself if you need to develop any of these skills that I talked about to improve your remote work success, or the to improve your candidacy as a remote work candidate. And if you're not sure, you can always take some skills tests to determine and measure some of these skills that we talked about today. Some resources you may consider: ONET. ONET.net has an interest profiler, and Career One Stop also has some skills assessments and things that you can go on through their website and kind of get some determinations on what your strong skill sets are. Now, after you do that, you will decide and prioritize which skills to develop. So, to decide what skills you need to develop, you have to think about if you're willing and able to invest the time and money to develop these skills. Members can take what you want to think about are things like soft skills, like LinkedIn Learning, Coursera can be helpful there. Some of that's paid, some of that's free. Other digital skills you might learn on YouTube and other resources. Some resources and links help you get started honing your skills. Are free, like YouTube videos. And so though there are ways that you can do this for free, but there are other ways, where there are paid options as well. And you just kind of have to decide what you want to do for the type of job you are looking for. Now, how do you demonstrate these skills on your resume? So along with the top 7 skills we discussed, you also want to include key skills from the job description that you are applying to on your resume. So basically, what you want to do is analyze the job description and highlight the skills you have. These will be the skills to include on your resume. So in the chat, if you'd like to participate, write down what you think are some of the skills you could place in the summary and skills or profile section at the top of your resume from this example. So we'll give everyone a second to do that. All right, I'm seeing some of those skills come in. Okay, great. And what about some skills you could place in the technology section of your resume with this example? Technology skills. Okay, good. I'm seeing some of those things come in. Google Ads, Google Analytics, very good. WordPress, Google, yep, that's great. And in terms of your profile summary, things like project management, problem solving, effective communication, very good. Excellent. All right, so here's an example of what adding these resumes or adding these skills from the job description, along with some of the 7 remote skills, might look like in the summary and skills section and the technology section of your resume. This, of course, is based on the skills you actually have. We do have some sample resumes included in the recap that you'll be getting, and also in the resources section. So you can do that, get those right now, or we'll send them in the recap. But you can see in the summary section, you've got managing monthly campaigns. Let's see. Communicate effectively with people from diverse backgrounds. So you're alluding to that cultural literacy piece of it, written communication, growth mindset, teamwork, emotional intelligence. That's all right there. And then you can see in the technology section as well. All right. So, what you want to do to take action is determine what skills you already have and need to develop. Hone in on the skills you've decided to develop, whether it's upskilling or reskilling, and demonstrate those skills on your resume, both the top must have skills and skills as they relate to the job description. All right. So, as promised, we're going to get to our questions. But as a reminder, we will be sending a recap email with this recording and any resources that will be helpful for you to apply these skills or figure out how to learn these skills and add them to your job search exercises. And so, you'll have that shortly. So, let's go ahead and get to our questions. All right. Hello, everybody. This is Tony. I see a few questions. So if you have got questions, feel free to add them. We have a little bit of time to be able to get through some of those. The first question is, in general, what is the best way to display that you have these skills on your resume to avoid resume overload and clutter? Which would be better? List remote skills in your skills section or weave them in with your job experience. So I think that this is a great idea to do both. And we kind of touched on it briefly in the presentation, but I think having a skills section where you can highlight some of these skills is beneficial. I also think in your job experience section, if there are places and with the bullets that you have listing your accomplishments and results, if you can weave in any of these skills like communication or problem solving, you can do it that way as well, and that way you kind of balance out where you're listing that information, so you're avoiding kind of what you're talking about in terms of like clutter and getting things overcrowded. How can we obtain jobs to which we are overqualified for? Looking to find less stressful jobs, but find that I am not getting responses for those applications. Yeah, this is something where you want to think about how you're positioning yourself on your resume. And I do think including a cover letter, if you're not doing that, when you are returning to work or applying for a job that you're overqualified for, can be really beneficial. I would say on your resume, you're not it's not necessarily toning down your experience, but you don't want to lead with I have 20 years of leadership experience if you're looking for an individual contributor role that needs 5 years of experience. So you might say something like with more than 5 years experience in your profile summary. And also there are some things that you can do with your job titles. Obviously you're not going to change them, you're going to list your job title. But maybe you're a director or something like that, but really looking for a project management or project coordinator role. And maybe in parentheses, behind that director name or director title, you could put something that's a little more appropriate for the work that you did while you were there. You can also um, focus your bullets on your resume and your work experience to be related to the specific job, of course, that you're applying for, but maybe you don't include, that you manage 9 team members for a job that doesn't require a manager or management experience, excuse me. Also, in your cover letter, you really can talk about and really connect to why you're interested in the job at the company. And also just kind of highlight, I'm really excited about this opportunity because it would allow me to contribute to a team doing A, B, and C, which of course would come from the job description and would be skills that, were quote unquote, you were overqualified for, did earlier in your career, but at least you're setting the stage. For people to understand that when they look at your resume, they might see that you're overqualified, but you've already said that you're interested in this job because of this. All right. Let's see. This is tough job market. Yes, it is. In your opinion, what is the first thing employers look at first on incoming resumes? I think that's hard to say. It's hard to know exactly, so I don't want to speculate on that. I do think that with the volume of applications that come in, what employers probably do as they're getting started reviewing applications is they're going to do a keyword search in their database for the skills, the job title, the level of experience, that they're looking for so that they can narrow down the pool of applicants, which just sort of kind of emphasizes the fact of why it's really important to tailor your resume to those skills that are required in the job. Are you seeing a trend for more creative and stylized resumes to demonstrate creativity and digital tool proficiency, or is keeping it simple better? I think keeping it simple is exactly what you need to do, particularly when you are applying to a job on a company website that is likely using an applicant tracking system. If you have the direct email to the person who is hiring, or you're connected to them on LinkedIn or whatever, you can have a more stylized resume that you email directly to a person, but uploading a stylized resume to a system that uses an applicant tracking system is not something that we recommend. Um, how to apply for a career change with no experience. So I think this is how you position yourself, and it really does take some pre work before you do start applying to jobs. You need to figure out what it is you want to do, what transferable skills you have, what's going to be required to make the change, and then kind of formulate your plan from there. But really, it's going to depend on how you position yourself and your transferable skills. Also, as you're working through a career change, because it does take some time, maybe you can do some volunteer work to get some experience, or you can do some freelance work to get some experience and build a portfolio. So, those are some things that I would think about initially. How to overcome ageism in applying. So there's a couple, we have many resources and webinars on the FlexJob site. So I encourage you to check that out. Very high level, you definitely want to make sure your resume is optimized, not only for applicant tracking systems, but for current expectations and standards, which means there is no objective statement. You don't have your physical address. Your email address is something that is not like AOL or Earthlink or one of those older services that could cause somebody to think you might be a little bit older. You really only need to share 10 to 15 years of experience. I wouldn't include dates with your education. And I also wouldn't include references available on request. That's kind of the first step. And then you can look at other things like your LinkedIn profile. You can target companies that have made it a commitment to hire a diverse workforce, including older workers. You can go to AARP or the Certified Age Friendly Institute to check that out, or those resources out as well. Are many remote postings just posted due to HR compliance requirements, but actually go to internal on-site or hybrid employees? Wondering, as I've applied to some of these and all have the minimum and preferred qualifications, but don't even get an interview. I don't know that that's the case. I do think that for remote jobs, the number of applicants applying for one remote job is at least 7 times higher than the number of applicants for an in-person job. And actually, we're seeing multiple hundreds, if not close to 1,000 applicants per job. And so a lot of people have said the same thing that you are sharing, that they are applying to jobs they're qualified for, they're doing all of the right things, and they're not getting contacted for an interview. And so while some of the jobs may not be filled once they're posted for a number of different reasons, it is taking people a really long time to land interviews and to land a remote job in general in this market. Hopefully that will change soon, but you will put yourself in a better position if you are doing, collecting resources and, educating yourself on, the best practices for applying to jobs. You might want to layer in, if you're not, some additional networking with the places you're applying with, follow up strategies, and things like that. All right, everybody, that's our time for today. We appreciate you being here. Again, we will be back tomorrow with another webinar. And also on Thursdays, we do go to TikTok and the FlexJobs channel to do a Q&A. So if you have questions and you have some time tomorrow, that's at noon Eastern time. So please find us there. We will be sending you a copy of this recording. We appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being here, and hopefully it was really helpful. Good luck to everybody. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.